Hi, happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Woohoo! Happy birthday, Alex. Happy birthday, Ray. Happy birthday, a few people. Happy anniversary, Lena. Um, if I've missed you, I'm sorry. I can't keep up with everything. I barely had enough sense to keep up with that just now. So, this one's going to be sort of quick, I think. But actually on a time crunch, so I've got half an hour. I gave myself 30 minutes just in case I needed it. But basically, I'm going to be reading some stuff that I had written down. And this is, I haven't really talked a lot to anybody about my life before this family, but this is just a little bit of some, little bit of history, and I may be overlapping some information. If I am, I'm sorry. Um, I'm not exactly as organized as I try to be. Um, but this is it's life as I have seen it. Now, life I knew it before the age of 17 was a dream. I was adopted uh, by the name of Baby Girl Taylor to Mr. and Mrs. Bill Horace and Betty Rhodes Ramsey. I was rotten. I knew it and I didn't care. I, I was the honey badger before there was a honey badger. I used to say that if I had a kid like me, I'd kill it because I was so awful, mean. I was spiteful and destructive. Yeah, you get the picture. The kind of kid that a parent sees coming and winces. I was so bad that I penned apology letters to both my daddy and my granny when I was in my 30s, and they both laughed and said, "Oh, you weren't mean, you were just hard headed." They were being kind. I was a wretched demon child. I know this, I'm fully aware. So picture a blonde haired, blue eyed, only child brat in a neighborhood with predominantly boys, with only one girl that was a constant, and maybe a girl here or there moving in or out of the neighborhood again. So, as far as I was concerned, it was heaven. My parents both had fairly lucrative jobs. My mama was in administrative work. She was a CPA. My dad, um, he was the Oconee County plant manager for Southern Bell, which at that time, if you're old enough to know it, you remember Southern Bell. There was no other phone company. That was it. Southern Bell. If you lived in a different part of the country, it was that part of the country, Southern Bell, like PAC Bell for Pacific, um, kind of a thing. But the Bell Phone Company was the only phone company. That was it. The whole state of South Carolina had one area code, and it was 803. Our phone number was 803-882-9007. I'll never forget that phone number. It's the first one I ever remembered, and it'll probably be the last one I'll ever have to forget. Um, but my granny lived with us. She was my dad's mom, and she'd moved in with my parents when they got married in, excuse me, in 1950. So she'd always lived with us. And she took care of the house and me while they both worked to make a very nice living for us, which they did. I was born in Anderson at the Anderson Memorial Hospital, as it was named at the time, February 3rd, 1964. I was born into the world by a woman named Jessie M. Haler, who gave me up for adoption. To this day, I've never found a single thread to her, even on 23andMe or Ancestry. I it's the line's gone. I don't know what's up with that. Um, I do eventually find some things out down the road, but I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So, the Ramseys adopted me, and my life went along just fine. As I said, I was a rotten child, awful, willful, smart ass, mean, destructive, perfect for growing up with boys. Uh, Across the street lived the Rosiers. They had three boys, Troy, Tad, and Ty. Troy was 4 years older than me, 5 years older than Tad, and 7 years older than Ty, who was in diapers. He wasn't a newborn, but he was still in diapers when we met. Then they became my first extended family. Next door to me uh, were the Harts. They had two boys, Alan and Keith, whom we called Cricket, and have no idea why. Um, on the opposite corner from my backyard lived the Burgesses, and they had one boy, and his name was Dean. Down the block on the other side of my house, back that way, was the Alewines. They had one son named Randy and two girls, Cynthia and Andrea. Now, Cindy and Randy were already grown and graduated. Um, Cindy was about to move out because she was marrying Danny Garrett. So um, Randy was there for a while, and then he eventually, it wasn't long, he didn't stay. So it was just Andrea there. And she was, I think, a year behind me, maybe 2 years. I can't remember. Um, so Andrea was the youngest. She was a year or two behind me. Now, Lori and Will Sandifer lived a couple houses down, but nobody much liked playing with either one of them because they were really weird. Um, Lori was a pretty little girl, but was a whole other type of spoiled than myself. She got an actual playhouse in her backyard, not one of those put it together things. They didn't have those back then. This was a full size shed that her father had built out there with a kitchen, table, and chairs, everything. It had just everything. um, Will was just a whiny little snot gobbler, from what I can remember. Which isn't very much. Um, it was really strange because Will was white-headed, very blonde, like myself at that time, and Lori, her hair was black. So I think Lori must have taken after her mom, who was a very spoiled woman. Never in my life had I seen anyone that had the bedrooms for the daughter was in red and white, and the carpet was red. And when she vacuumed it, she raked it into a pattern with a rake. Never seen that before, but turns out that's something they do in fancy places. But yeah, so they were different. Um, there were a couple of kids from over the fence neighborhoods that we hung out with too, like David Gardner, Dan Dalton. He lived. Uh, is Dan was in a strange place as far as neighborhood location because he was like between two different neighborhoods. I don't know. I don't know how to. But he was our friend. We went to his house. He came to our house. We used to swim in the creek right at the end of his driveway because that's where the runoff came through, and it had dug out a little bit of depth in there. And it was, for a kid, it was, it came up to like my chest maybe. And we swam out there until I saw a snake, and then I didn't swim there anymore. um, but God, we had fun. And it's Jonathan Roberts and a couple of other kids. We lived pretty unremarkable lives in the way that we didn't really see any tragedy or crime or none of the stuff that seemed to be everywhere that you look nowadays. Um, and that's sad. I hate that because the kids that came after us, kids like now, even the previous, the generation from the 90s, maybe Gen X, will never, ever know the freedom that we had because we could literally ride our bicycle anywhere in town, any given day, and it was okay. Seneca wasn't that big. It's still not big, but it really was tiny then. I mean, very small. In the whole of Oconee County, there were 3 high schools: Walhalla, Westminster, and Seneca. That's it. Um, take that back. Is Fair Play in Oconee? Oakway? Salem. If you were in Salem, you went to Walhalla High School. So I think Oakway had their own school, and I think it might have been in Oconee County because the year I was a senior, we had to pick a name for the new school that was going to merge Westminster and Oakway, and we picked West Oak. So that's how it got its name. We got to vote for it. Class of 82, Westminster High School. Thank you very much. Um, anyhow, we didn't see any bad stuff like you see now. There were two houses on either side where people seemed to move and then leave after a while. One of the houses was a pastorium for the local Church of Christ, which is still there. It's still open and it still operates. So we saw a few ministers and their families come and go. Only two families really remain with me, and that was the Swims and the Jellies. Janie Swims had cool older teenage sisters. It was, and they had the whole, we're talking 70s, and I'm not even kidding. These lovely ladies had beautiful long straight hair, beautiful fresh faces, didn't even need makeup, fingernails like for Streisand. It's like butter. Beautiful, beautiful girls, gorgeous figures. They wore the hip huggers with the bell bottom jeans, and they were the shit. Let me tell you. And Janie had a little brother named Eddie. So Janie was closest to my age, and we were very close. I grieved her when she moved away because she was special to my heart. She really was, and we still are. I can't remember if I got added back to her list after I had to change my Facebook. I need to check that. But we reconnected, so we talk to each other still on Facebook. And Andrea, of course, and Dan. Then the other family, let's see, it was the Jelly family. And the only thing I can remember about them is they had a daughter named Margaret. They did have other children. In fact, they had so many kids that the mom and dad made the formal living room into their bedroom. And they had a Cocker Spaniel named Olafia. They were some clean kids, though, because they always smelled like Safeguard soap. Always. So, as you can see, life was the American dream when I was a kid. A 3-bedroom brick house with a formal dining room and formal living room, garage, and a carport. Yes. Care to host a Tupperware party? Yep, it was Brady Bunch land, no doubt. And it rocked. So, my mama was an alcoholic with a heart murmur, who died in her sleep at the age of 45 on October 20th, 1977, 2:10 a.m. in Seneca, South Carolina, in the residence of 303 Cathmet Drive, which before that it was just Route 6, Seneca, South Carolina. Then I grew up. I'll spare you some of the drama of my teenage years, but you'll catch the tail end of them soon enough. So after Mama died, Daddy found the bottle that she drowned in and crawled into it himself and tried to catch up with her. In that failed attempt, he managed to get married less than 2 years after she was gone to a gold digger. I begged him not to marry her. I said, shack up if you want to, but do not marry her. Of course, I was a stupid kid that knew nothing. He was a grown-ass man and do exactly as he pleased, and marry he did. She isolated him from his family, drove my granny out of the home that she had known since 1950, and managed to get me out of there pretty quick, too. And then she took him for every dime he had. So it's kind of where you're going to catch the tail end of my teens here. So, see, when they married, Vera made Daddy sell our house, which was bigger, twice as nice, newer, And we moved into her older, not nearly as nice, not half as big, but paid for house by her first husband. Yeah, you see a pattern here? So yeah, I grew up in Seneca, y'all, and there's nothing to do there, and there was even less of nothing in the 70s and 80s. So the teens in Oconee County all went to Holland's Rollerama every weekend. The skating rink was to us what Central Perk was to Monica and Rachel and all those other friends. I was pretty good on a pair of skates. I was in the Key Club. It was a social thing that you could be included in if you were good on the floor, and I was very good. Even had a skate partner for all the tricks and stuff. His name was Johnny Smith and his sister Cheryl Smith, and they both went to Walhalla High School with me. So at least when I had to move, I knew a face or two. All of a sudden, Johnny just wasn't around anymore, and nobody seemed to know what happened, and I didn't see Cheryl at school anymore either. So there went that gig on my weekends. Still went most of the time, but slowed way down. And this one afternoon, I was cutting town in Walhalla, which is what they called it then. Now they call it cruising. So this guy from school starts posturing to race me, and I've got a friend in the car with me, and I ain't gonna lie, we was smoked up. A little bit. We was a little smoked up. Um, and she was a little younger than me, or she was a little older than me. She was 19 and was going through a divorce. And I thought, wow, what a worldly older woman. How wise. I mean, I was fucking stupid. I was 16. I didn't know nothing. So, my car was badass. You hear me? Um, I drove a 1970 Oldsmobile Cutlass 442 bronze color with a white vinyl top, aftermarket kicking ass stereo system. hmm I'm laughing with my friend Darren Corbett trying to race me, so I'm like, fuck it, let's go. I dusted him in a half a block. So he follows me down, and I whip my smart ass right over into the gravel, showing my ass, and I get out of the car and I start giving him shit. And I look over his shoulder to see who got out of the passenger side. And it was fucking Johnny Smith's ass. He joined the army, had a buzz cut and everything. And then this other skinny guy gets out of the back seat, and Johnny says, "Hey man, this is my cousin Jimmy. He just moved here from Augusta, Georgia. Jimmy, this is April. She's my skate partner, or was," and then laughed. And then I laughed, and Jimmy just kind of grinned and walked to the bleachers and sat down. So we chatted a bit, and then my friend said she has to get back home to get her nephew off the bus. So I said, "Well, I got to go, guys." So took off, took her home. And on the way back, I thought, well, gee, I wonder if they're still hanging out, because I hadn't seen Johnny and I wanted to visit some more. So I went back by there. And Darren and Johnny were playing basketball. Jimmy was sitting up on the hillside just watching them. So I just went over and sat down next to him. We started talking. He invited me to go to a Halloween party that his family was throwing. And I said, cool, I might come by. Let me see if I can get permission from Daddy to go. So we hung out until dark, and then Darren left. And I drove Johnny and Jimmy home and got myself home. Didn't really give it much thought until that next weekend. And there he was at the skating rink with Johnny and his brother, Ralph, who I thought was kind of dorky. Jimmy and I hung out together that night, and they offered to give me a ride home, but Daddy said no way. So Jimmy asked me for my phone number, and I told him he could have it, but it was going to cost him some sugar. So he paid up pretty quick and left with my phone number. So we went out on a double date with Johnny and my friend, and we had a great time. We went driving down an old dirt road that was popular for couples to go to at the time. God. Go down there and have bonfires and drink and whatever. My ex-boyfriend's older brother kept driving by because we were in my car, and he knew it was my car. And he kept driving past like he was being all nosy and shit. I'm watching for Jack to come home. It's about time. So anyhow, he left an 8-track tape in the car with some seriously awesome music. And I think that's the thing that made me fall in love with him, was that his the way he liked music that way. We began talking pretty regularly when he could get to the phone at the fast fare to call me. Him and Johnny actually walked over to my house once or twice. But in Walhalla back then, it was a short walk, really. I asked him if he would go to my prom with me. He said he would. So then all of a sudden, just like before, poof, Jimmy and his family, Johnny, all of them disappeared again. I'm like, fuck, what is wrong with these people? Keep in mind, this is a time where not everybody had a telephone. Um, that's hard to believe, but it's the honest to God truth. Um, so anyhow, well, this time it was a long time before I heard back from him. It was a while. It was months. So, in the morning after my prom, to be exact, was the day I heard from him. It was a Sunday, and he called, um, and asked if I'd like to come to church that night. So, Daddy did agree to let me go to their house after church for a while. And we spent every waking minute together that we could. And then by the next Wednesday, which was the week after Mother's Day, Jimmy proposed to me after church. His mom gave a diamond of hers to him to give to me, and I won't ever forget it. He told me to close my eyes and hold out my hand, and then he took my hand in his and he slid the ring on, and he said, "Don't ever take this off." Oh God, I was in heaven. I'd never been in a serious relationship. I wasn't but 17 years old. And I went home happy and excited. I woke up the whole house showing them my ring. And Daddy or Vera, neither one were very affected by that. They thought, oh God, this bitch has lost her shit. Um, so they behaved like I just told them I was going to the dance or something. So time rolled on till the end of my junior year in high school. And on the last day, my last exam, I took that. I loaded all my shit up that I could get into the car. And I moved out and moved in with Jimmy and his family. His mother seemed to be elated and offered me to come and stay with them. I was 17, so I was old enough to leave home without parents' consent, so I did. I left a note for my daddy, and then I walked out and never went back. I did try going to school with the new living accommodations. Just wasn't working, and I ended up quitting school in my senior year like a fucking moron. So then it was time to look for work, and I couldn't seem to find anything that wasn't of the sharecropping variety, which we did at the orchard/chicken plant. We ended up moving to Anderson to 311 E Street in June of 1982, right after Angel Judith Markham was born. Angel Bates. And this is what I consider my actual life. This is where my life began. Anything before that was just a vehicle to get me here. So, we moved in this big old mill house that had once been a duplex, but had since been opened back up into a 3-bedroom house with two bathrooms, and 2 kitchens. And we moved right in next to Danny, Terry, and Linda Gunner. Ray didn't live in the same house. She lived with her mother, Rachel, who had divorced their father some years before. Terry played the grooves right off his record of the Manhattan Transfer, ooh ah, cool, cool kitty. That's about the boy from New York City. He played it in a constant stream from his record player right out at the window, and everybody on the block wanted to choke him. We met Carl Sherman and his family, Ruby, Lloyd, Margie, Leon, and the whole rest of them. There was a bunch of them people. Turns out the house we rented had once been rented by Danny and his ex-wife, who everybody said had been a witch and that she cursed the house and it was now haunted. And it really was. All kind of supernatural shit went on in that house. And if I hadn't been there to see it with my own 2 eyeballs, I wouldn't have believed it myself. But Ralph and Janice were the first to leave. They took Angel and hauled Ass out. And the disturbance seemed to be targeted at Angel. There were what threw them out of the house. Well, not threw them, but well, maybe I guess you could say that. I'll talk about the incident some other time. But for now, um, we'll just say the sticking point was there were claw marks on the seat of Angel's diaper. Janice was on the sidewalk and said, I'm not going back in that house with my baby. I'm not going back in there. No. And I mean, it was like a day or two and they were gone. They moved. They went back to Seneca. Um, so they went back to Seneca and Ralph went back to work for Dickie Moody at the flower shop. And I'll have to come back and tell some things that happened there. Freaky shit. Um, that was where we were living when Carla Sprouse, Oliver, Sister Kitty, Mama, Granny, Great Granny came into our lives. I don't know. Maybe it was us that came into theirs. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. But that's my 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 26 minutes. So that was the only way I could keep myself focused to give any kind of info. And this was information about me mostly, but nobody really knows anything about me. And it's been a really long time since anybody ever cared to ask. But anyway, that's where we are for now. Happy Valentine's Day. I hope you guys enjoyed the the read. I enjoyed reading to you, and I enjoy giving this little histories and little stuff, it's nice because there's so much that you guys don't know, and I know too much to keep it in my head anymore. It's when you look at a death certificate and birthdays are not right, the name of the parents isn't right, or the place of birth, the stuff that you need to know, nobody seems to know in certain parts of my family. So this is for their benefit as well. And honey, I love you. You know who you are. You do. And it's all right. But that's it for today. I'm going to call it quits here at right at 27 and a half minutes or so. And I love you. I think of you daily. I miss you. I can't wait to see you again. If you have any suggestions, if you have any questions, if you have stories that you want to hear about or people you want to hear about or specific times, whatever, let me know and we'll see what we can get done. Good night.